Hello everyone, good day. I am Brian Dave Gasok, a BS in Mathematics 4A student of Kapalong College of Agriculture Sciences and Technology. And now I am going to report the Field Study 1, or Module 5 Assessment and Reporting. So we are the reporters, Edrin T. Baquero, January Paul R. Garcia, and me, Brian Dave Gasok. So first, I will going to report Lesson 1, which is Designing, Selection, Organization, and Utilization of Assessment Strategies. So the objective of this lesson are the following. So at the end of the lesson, students or learners explain the meaning of the term assessment. Number 2, compare diagnostic, formative, and summative assessment strategies and formulate activities using these assessment strategies. So now let's start with this quote. Assessment is as old as education itself. So it's according to Mitchell, 1992. So this means that since education has begun, assessment also has existed. So meaning, because education is the process of acquiring information or sharing or teaching information through instruction. So therefore, if you teach or share information to a people or a person, it's a way of educating that person. And thus, if you however you determine or you check if that person really acquires the information or the skill or the competency or the knowledge that you've shared, then it is a way of assessing or assessment. So you can ask questions to that person to assess if he or she really understood or really formulate meaning because of understanding and comprehending the knowledge or the information that you have shared. Okay, so let's proceed with assessment. So what is assessment? So assessment is the process of gathering data. More specifically, assessment is the ways instructors gather data about their teaching and their students' learning. So according to Hannah and Detmer, so assessment is the process of gathering data. So to know how or what are the students' learnings, however your learners learn, you have to do assessment. So to gather information and data, in which very essential for you as a teacher to determine or to know if your teaching method is effective and if the students really acquire learning from your instruction or from your teaching, way of teaching. So may it be a data quantitative or a qualitative data, in which very important or very essential as for you as a teacher to assess learnings and teaching method that you have. Okay, so that it is the data provide a picture of a range of activities using different forms of assessment such as pretest, observations, and examinations. So through assessment you can have activities that is very purposeful according to purpose of your assessment. So maybe pretest, observations, and examination. So these are important things in assessment, in doing your assessment, because during the pretest you can know their knowledge regarding the topic before the instruction, and observation, how students behave during the class, and however they learn the topic is done through your observation, and examination is done after the instruction to determine if the students really have learning all throughout the process of instruction. So next is assessment. Every day teacher assess their students to ensure the quality of instruction. So assessment really must be done every day, because every day you provide or you share, you have your lesson, you teach students every day. So therefore your students, you need to assess your students if they really understood if they really are into the topic, because the essence of assessment is to identify if your students really learn or really into the lesson that you are teaching. No, because every day is there is a spiral progression in your teaching, so therefore you need to assess their learning in order for them to not be left behind if you transfer to another lesson or topic. No? So assessment as defined in the Ed Order number 8 series of 2015, assessment is a continuous process of identifying, gathering, organizing, and interpreting qualitative and quantitative information about what learners know and can do. Yeah, it is a continuous process in which done day by day, because it is to identify, to gather, and organize data and actually interpret quantitative and qualitative information about your students, because this informations incorporates what they know and what they can do. No, it focuses on their competency in their learnings and in their skill that they acquired all throughout your instruction or teaching process. So indeed, the objective and subjective information accumulated from various assessment is valuable. Yes, it is valuable because those informations can be of very use, because it could be utilized through assessing not only your students but your skill or your capability as a teacher to improve teaching strategies and teaching method during the instruction. Okay, let's proceed. So note, in designing and utilizing assessment strategy, the teacher must know the purpose of assessment. So as I've said already earlier, your assessment must be in line with the purpose of your assessment. No? So here are 3 ways of assessing students according to purpose. We have diagnostic assessment, formative assessment, and summative assessment. So I know you are familiar with these 3 assessment strategies, no? So let's first discuss the diagnostic assessment. Diagnostic assessment is given before the instruction. So this assessment strategy allows you to know and spot the knowledge and learnings that your students already acquired before you have given the instruction, because this is a way of recalling their prior knowledge regarding a certain topic. So because it is really essential that you know what are the learnings that your students have beforehand to determine the method of instruction that you'll be going to use. Because diagnostic assessment attempts to quantify what students already know about that topic. So yeah, so you have to determine if the students really knowledgeable already about the topic, in order for you to discuss it not thoroughly, or you just have to discuss some important points and details that they need to remember. However, if your students really do not know about the topic, so you have to scaffold them in order for them to cope with the difficulty that they have or they experience, in learning the certain topic or a lesson. So diagnostic assessment is also to determine your students' learning strengths and weaknesses about the topic. So to know their strengths and weaknesses, so you have to do this assessment, diagnostic assessment, because before the instruction you need to know their strengths and weaknesses. Okay, in knowing their strengths and weaknesses, so you can have your assessment in your teaching method, if what kind of assessment you're going to do in response to their strengths and their weaknesses about that topic. So if they have the strengths, so you have to develop the strengths that they have in knowledge and the skills that they already acquired, and also if they have their weaknesses about the topic, so you need to focus on that weaknesses to develop it as their strength in along the process of instruction. So also knowing students' strengths and weaknesses can help you better plan what to teach and how to teach it. So knowing their strengths and weaknesses, you can really determine how you plan the instruction in order to develop strengths and weaknesses that they have in the learning process in the topic. So you can plan how to teach this topic according to their needs and according to their strengths. So how to teach it depends on your assessment to your students. Okay, these are as examples of a diagnostic assessment. We have pre-tests on content and ability. So it may be done quizzes, 5-item quiz, 10-item quizzes that focuses on their abilities and their knowledge or about the information that they already know. Okay, this self-assessment, so identifying skills and competencies. So you can ask them questions about their KWL. So what are those? So then what already know, what they want to know, and what they already learn. So it is a way of knowing what the students' knowledge, competency, what kind of competency they develop already in this topic. So also discussion board responses. So you can have the questioning and your student will respond to the idea to that question, or you can provide a code or a phrase and that you call upon students who will elaborate or answer the questions or give their ideas, point of view about the certain topic what you discuss in front, to develop to know their content specific prompts. So next is interview. So you can have your interview if you're really into that learning and teaching, to develop their learning. Students, you have to interview one by one the students. You can have 10-minute interview to know their strengths, their weaknesses, if they already discussed the topic, or if the students have a background or prior knowledge about the topic. So what are the things that are very important before you start your instruction? So it is done through interview. So however you do the interview depends upon your method or strategy. So next we have formative assessment. So formative assessment is given throughout the learning process. So meaning you will assess your students while the discussion or the learning process is still ongoing, because it seeks to determine how students are progressing through a certain learning goal. So if you teach solving problems and how to solve problems, you provide steps. So in order for you to determine if they are progressing in their learning, so you need to have your formative assessment. So in doing your formative assessment, you will give one question, maybe one question to your students, one problem that they will solve following the steps and the process and the formula of solving the problem. So through this, you can spot or you can determine if your students followed the steps or learned the steps and the process of solving a certain problem. So also it provides feedback information during the instructional process while learning is taking place. So because you assess, so you can have feedback. If they miss a step, you can give feedback to them. Your students needs to memorize the steps, and memorize the formula in order to successfully answer or arrive at a solution. So a primary focus is to identify areas that may need improvement. So the purpose is the formative assessment is to help students with their difficulty in a subject matter. So it is not to discriminate them because this is their weaknesses, this is what they don't know, what they do not develop in themselves during the instruction, but this is to determine if what are those rooms for improvement, no, in order for you as a teacher to assess that and develop that areas that they are finding it difficult, no. So as a teacher, this formative assessment is really essential, no. So you have to do these types of formative assessment. It may be in the form of observations during in-class activities of students' nonverbal feedback during lecture. So you can observe if they really respond positively to your instruction. Okay, this is a type of formative assessment. If you as a teacher is a boring teacher, so you can observe that your students really are tired or bored or sleepy, and that is kind of the one thing that you need to observe to your student. If they have that kind of response to your instruction, you can change your teaching strategy and make it interactive and lively. Okay, so you can have homework exercises. So it is a form of problem sets. You can provide a set of problems to your students, and they need to answer it to their respective houses, no, in order for you to ensure that they still learning even if they are in their house. So there they can find assistance with their family or their peers, or however they answer the questions, as long as they develop skills in answering and in learning the topic, the subject matter, no? So reflection journals that are reviewed periodically during the semester. So through this reflection journal, you can spot what students really is missing, what students' weaknesses and strengths about the topic, even if you already discussed it, you know. So you can check it through the reflection journal. So question and answer sessions, both formal, planned, and informal. So you can have your oral presentation from your students. So may it be done through during class, during instruction, you throw some questions and you have to call random students to answer certain questions, or maybe you inform them that you have oral presentation or you have question and answer, and then the following session, so they can have they can prepare for that period of oral presentation or question and answer, no? They will study. So that is a form of formative assessment to determine if they really understand or they really absorb the information you've shared during the instruction. Now, conferences between the instructor and student at various points in the semester. So you can collaborate with your students. So as a teacher, you need to connect to your students and have conversation to your student, communicate to your students to know their need and to know their strength, their weaknesses, and what are the things that you need to be done in the learning process to develop their learnings, along the way. So in class activities where students informally present their results, so you can provide any activities to your students to know and determine if they really acquire the knowledge and present the result of your instruction, so through these activities you can determine if your learning method is effective or your teaching strategy is in line with the needs of the students. So last is to student feedback collected by periodically answering specific question about the instruction and their self-evaluation of performance and progress. So it is a form of giving feedback to the teaching method, the teaching strategies, and how they acquire and develop learnings in themselves. So it focuses more on their performance and their progress, during the instruction. So let's proceed to the summative assessment. So a summative assessment is given at the end of the unit or instruction. So now this is the assessment of their learning all throughout or at the end of the instruction that you've done. So it assesses the student's mastery of a topic after the instruction. So after the instruction, after you discuss all the lessons, all the topics, so this is now a way of assessing them if they really acquire skills and competency after your instruction, no? So it is used to evaluate student learning, skill acquisition, and academic achievement at the conclusion of a defined instructional period. So, oh yes, you can really evaluate if your students acquire skills, and if they achieve the learning goals or learning objective that you set during your instruction, no? So it is important to have summative assessment. This is to determine if your students are into the topic really, and if they develop learnings after you have your instruction to them. No, it is also more product oriented and assesses the final product. So summative assessment is not only to know the skill, the knowledge they acquire, the skill they acquire, but it's more product oriented, no, and assess the final product. It's more on a portfolio, no. See, it is the overall performance, their overall performance after the instruction or the unit, no. So summative assessment can be done through examinations, so major or high stakes exams, so final examinations, a summative assessment. This is a form of summative assessment. It is what we normally do in our school system, in our schools, in our institutions. So term papers draft submitted through this semester would be a formative assessment. So you can require your students with term papers. So term papers are submitted after the duration of the instruction. So when you're going to check their term papers before it is to be passed as a final paper, so it is a form of formative assessment to spot what are the things that need improvement, what are the areas that needs improvement in their term paper. So that is a form of formative assessment. However, if they will pass the term paper as a output, no, as a product, so it is already a summative assessment. So you can have that. And also a project. So project phases submitted at various completion points can be formally assessed. So if you're required of a project, so you can formatively assess it through letting them submit it to you before they will submit the final product, you know, because through this you can determine if the project really in line with the competency or really in line with the goal of the learning outcome that you wanted to achieve, you know? So it is a form of formative assessment because you're going to check it if there are room for improvement or if it's really enough for a project or a perfect project to be passed, no? So as a conclusion, assessment is an integral part of instruction as it determines whether or not the goal of education are being met. So really, an assessment is very important, very essential in the instruction, no? Because it determines, it allows you as a teacher to determine if the goal of the instruction or the goal of education or the objective are being met and being successfully acquired by your students, no? So assessment affects decisions about grades, placements, advancement, instructional needs, curriculum, and in some cases funding. So that's why you need to assign or design assessment method which is very essential and responsive to learners' need, no, to improve their learning and the process of instruction, no? So assessment is very important, and thus as a teacher you need to develop assessment that is purposeful and conducive for teaching and learning. Okay, I hope you learned something from this video discussion. So I know that you already know about the assessments, these three assessment strategies: the formative, diagnostic, and summative. So future teachers, however you use or utilize this in the teaching learning method depends upon you. Okay, so this is a question I formulated so that you will going to answer. So, why do you need to consider the purpose of your assessment? Okay, so you can answer it through our comment box. So, thank you so much everyone for listening. Thank you for watching, and God bless us all. Thank you and goodbye.